Amen. Do you ever feel like you don't know what to do, nor where to turn? What's my next step? There's been a lot of that stuff for, I think, a few of us lately. It's like, what is the next thing I do? I just don't know what that next thing is. And, when seeking, I want to talk to you about this today, a biblical approach to counseling and therapy. And so what's my next step? And it's not always a choice between right and wrong. Those kind of things we don't need counsel on. We know what we're supposed to do, and maybe sometimes we need to talk to somebody in order to get the right perspective on something that being, well, this isn't exactly right, but then you can talk to somebody and they're not emotionally attached to it. They can weigh in and show you that it's not worth it. But what if there's some stigma stuck with your predicament and you don't want to talk to somebody about it? That makes it even tougher. And so it's hard to ask questions sometimes with people, and yet the Bible is very clear that we're supposed to be doing that. One thing that's interesting to me, I sat here 2 weeks ago, and normally I sit in the back other corner, but so I went and sat over here. It was different. You got to get a different perspective. That's also where I learned when we put the TVs in the new building, they're going to be much higher. Because normally when I sit over there, I can just look straight and see the TV. But if you're in the middle, you have to look right by somebody's face in order to see the TV. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody here thinks, Chris is making eye contact directly with them, and it's awkward. But no, what you're doing is you're looking at the TV right behind his head. So we're going to move that up a little bit. As I sat over here and heard Matt's message, I knew at that time that my message this week would be part 2. And it's interesting when that happens is, I don't know what any perception is, but Matt and I haven't talked a lot lately. He's busy, we're busy, we've got a lot going on. And that's not a complaint, it's just the way life is. Okay, it's a small one. And, we just don't talk a lot lately. We'll text, we'll call occasionally. But, we've got a lot of stuff going on. So it's not like we're talking about the messages we're going to preach, but I knew that this would be a part 2. But, busy, life happens. But I always enjoy that it seems as though the Lord is pulling us all in the same direction. That for me is what I enjoy. If you know the story, how many years ago did you guys move?
Back?
No way.
12.
It's never been that long. Matt and Brian moved away 12, 13 years ago. And Matt and I just went, physically other directions. But it's funny how the Lord brought us all to the same position. It just, I think about it often and love what the Lord's doing. But he spoke last week about agreement and walking with people and showing agreement with them. So I want to help you with this today. There's a few approaches to counseling and therapy. And through this message, I'm not trying to get you to confess to me and give me all your secrets. That's creepy. I don't want that. However, I'm here for you if you need it. But no, you need to tell me everything. I'm going to set up a booth over here, listen to everything. That sounds like actually kind of fun, doesn't it? Sit in the booth and have, call it confession and have you come tell me all the stuff. It'd be so much easier to write sermons. I know what you did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I can write that down. But there's a couple different approaches. There's the approach of, you don't talk or ask anyone. We're just going to do it, you're just going to go it alone. Or there's the approach that we ask people that we shouldn't about things in our life. There are people in my life that just don't care about me enough for me to ask them questions. Do you ever have that? If I don't feel that you have my best interest, why would I ask you a question? And then there's those that freely ask the right people the right questions, and that's probably where we should be. Of course, then there's the irony of trying to have the privacy. I'm a private person. But yet, you go to Facebook, you go to TikTok, and, people's lives are just out there for everybody to see. It's kind of ironic, but there's no doubt that asking the Lord for wisdom will get us more wisdom. It's a biblical promise. I have it up here for you. James chapter 1, verses 5 and 7 says this: If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. That is a Bible promise. It was part of also Matt's sermon last week. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. And so this nothing wavering, this is what faith is. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. So when I go to the Lord and ask, hey, I can use some wisdom on this, but I don't know if you can give it to me. No, but if I go to the Lord, hey, I need wisdom I know you can give it to me, but I don't know how it's going to work. I don't, that is more of a faithful or an approach that shows faith. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. And that then goes back, remember, to faith. And the faith is the believing that God can do it, not necessarily that He will do it. That's something I struggle with often because I feel if I pray for it, then that should be good enough. But that's not how prayer works, because the Lord will give me the best, but sometimes it's not what I want. But have you ever been in a place where Bible study and prayer weren't enough to answer your question? Maybe you had something happen, and you have a financial woe, or you have something else going on, and I can open the Bible, I can search, and I can find principles that may guide the decision, but nothing specific. Has that ever happened to you? Well, you're not alone. And the Bible says that you're not alone. Let's go over here to Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 15. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes. So what that's talking about is when we think something's right, we don't seek biblical counsel. When I'm saying biblical counsel, I'm not saying you only need to talk to somebody. We're not opening our Bibles. We're not praying about it. And you have somebody like that in your life where you've seen a bunch of dumb decisions. And the way the fool is right in his own eyes. This is what's just going to work. But he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. Some of you know where the Burkheads and the Gillespies came from in order to come here to start this church. There are some that believe, go ahead and do a blank there if you would, and that believe that the place we came from was a cult. I don't believe that. What I think what happens, though, is there's some people who are cultish in themselves. They have a tendency maybe to follow man, to worship man. I was lucky in that when we got there early, I ran into a man named Bob Hooker, and he rid me of a lot of that stuff early. But I don't believe we're in a cult, but I don't think leadership did anything to assuage people who, maybe were a little bit heavy in the man worship. I don't think they encouraged it, but they didn't stop it either. So I believe that somebody can come out of there and be normal. I believe somebody can go there and not be in a cult, but I do believe there are people that are in there in a cult. But one of the things that always drives me batty about when I was there is the whole idea that if you ever seek counsel, you have to do what that person says. And it was taught regularly. If you're going to go see the preacher, so on Sunday nights there would be a line, and as soon as the service is done, you can wait in line. The pastor would just answer questions. You go in and talk to him. I went in, 3 or 4 times in the course of my 6 years there, but it was a long wait, and you got a pat answer, and I didn't like that. But he's talking to thousands and thousands of people, so the pat answer was that. But you're told by other people, if you're going to go ask him the question, do what he says. Well, what if the advice doesn't fit? I went in there one time. I had no car payments. I had nothing. I was working a job that I hated, Cintas. And but part of me mentally thought maybe if I got a car payment, I'd have a better car. And at the meantime, maybe I would be a little bit more indebted to them, and maybe I would enjoy it a little bit more because none of them paid me. It was just kind of backwards thinking, but I was 23 at the time. And so I go in and talk to him because I was hoping he would just say, yeah, just don't do it. And so I asked him, if I go in debt for a car, I want debt. And he said, well, it's not debt, it's exchange. They're giving you a car, and you're paying for it, you're just paying it out over a long time. Okay, I get it. Okay. I was actually willing to walk out of there and not buy a new car. Well, I did buy a new car anyways. I bought a used car on payments. But the advice I needed at the time was run from debt. That's the advice I needed at the time. I didn't need a car payment. I didn't need a car payment just like I didn't need another hole in the head. And but however, that's the advice I got. But since it's the advice I asked for, I went ahead and did it. But of course, I asked the question first. And then I think what happens, I'm going to cover this a little bit later, is sometimes we come away from something like that with a knee-jerk reaction. And I think I did that, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But do you ever get your question answered even before you're done asking it? It's happened to me a couple times this week. I went to the Guitar Center, because there's some things, technology that we want to step into, like this, for instance, and have a little bit more consistency in the sound of the service, looking at wireless mics for worship team, stuff like that. And but we're talking about how to record off of the mixer. And so, right in the middle of the question, I knew what the answer was, but if you're mid-sentence, the guy's still going to answer your question, right? And so then you got to sit through the answer. Here it comes. Here it goes. And I also had another one. This service is going to be short today because you know what? We had only 2 songs, no piano, and then no offering. We're just squishing it all down. So I'm going to give you another story to lengthen the thing. I went to go get my Jeep fixed this week. I'm normally a do-it-yourselfer, I'm a mechanic in the Air Force. I'm mechanically inclined. And I had listed out 14 different things to get my Jeep started, but it wouldn't start unless I, sprayed starter fluid. But once I did, it ran fine. And just all the troubleshooting I could do. Finally took it to a mechanic who was also a Jeep owner, and he's like, after 2 weeks, I can't figure this thing out either. And so I took it to Sun Automotive. They said, all right, diagnostic fee is $199. All right, that's a bargain if you can figure it out. Just whatever. And they spent so much time doing it, working on it, that they called me back and said, well, we're going to need another $189. I'm like, wait, the diagnostic fee was $199. Why am I not? Now, if I pay more, are you guys going to figure it out? Oh, yeah, we think we're going to figure it out, but it's just taking more time. I'm like, the diagnostic fee was $199. And so it was a bunch of back and forth, but I tried to call Lisa, but she was in the bathroom, and I knew that Lisa was with Miranda, so I'm like, call Miranda, so maybe get Lisa's ringer on. So talk to Miranda, so okay, Miranda, here's what's going on, since Lisa's not there. And so about halfway through, she gave me some advice, and I ended up following that. And I think was the right thing to do is I went back in, because I then drove by and stopped to pick it up right as they were getting it fixed. I was just in town. And it's funny, as I walked up to the counter, I'm like, dudes, I didn't throw a fit as I came. It was a $199 diagnostic fee. Wouldn't it, if you had it done in 20 minutes, wouldn't you charge me still $199? Oh, you wouldn't refund any of it, so why am I paying it? But we had a little back. When I say a little back and forth, it was perfectly friendly. And but I saw some guy, am I going to feel silly if I did this? So of course I called Matt first because he's the guy that would master the whole get money back on something thing. And I should tell you that story about the van and the $20 back, but you can ask him some other time. But it's just sometimes we call, we talk to people, we try to figure out an answer. Proverbs 11:14 says this: where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. And what they told you here at the place where we came from, on that multitude of counselors, but you don't ask multiple people the same question. Because what if those 2 people tell you different things, and all of a sudden you can't do exactly what the first person said, so therefore that's not talking about that. You see one person out. No, that's not what the Bible's saying. And again, it was never him, the pastor, that ever said that. If you ask me a question, make sure you do it. But again, he never shot down the whole idea either. But where no counsel is, the people fall. And so, the sermon several weeks back when I talked about creation, and I talked about doubt, and about what the Bible says about creation, and why we shouldn't shy away from it, and all that. But because that teaching is slightly different than what a normal mainstream Bible-believing church would teach, when I first came up with the idea, I didn't ever bring it before the church. And, I brought up 4 other people. I talked to Bob Hooker, I talked to Clint Cavanis, I talked to other people, and, I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? And I was always waiting for somebody to help me shoot this down. And it never happened. But it was over the course of 2 decades before I actually gave you a full sermon on that idea. I've introduced it a couple times. But if something's not taught by mainstream Christianity, then I have to stop and ask myself why. And so sometimes we need to ask a lot of people a question so we can get some insight. How about Proverbs chapter 19, verse 20? Hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in thy latter end. See, there I can be wiser towards the end of my life just for the fact that I heard counsel. So seeking it makes me wise. And then the question becomes, why don't we ask? Do we not ask because of privacy? And that makes sense. There's certain things you probably wouldn't want to talk to me about, and I get that. There's certain things you wouldn't want to talk to Lisa or somebody else about in the church that you talk, and I get that. There's privacy issues that you got to be careful of. But, however, why is it? Is it because of control? Is it because of perception? Do we think that, well, if I ask somebody a question, they're going to know that I'm not perfect and I don't have everything together? And trust me, we know that anyways. See, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 18. Every purpose is established by counsel. See, that purpose, that's not even asking about a specific thing. That's talking about direction, purpose. and with good advice make war. See, maybe it's not a specific thing, maybe it's a general idea. So we've had a lot of Old Testament scripture here, but of course Proverbs and everything there, it applies all. But let's go ahead and look at a New Testament approach as well. Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 6. Watch this. Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unjust and not before the saints? And what this is going to tell us is it isn't scriptural for me to take any of you to court, or you me. If something bad happens, you know what? We're supposed to figure it out. And if we can't elevate it, the Bible teaches how we're supposed to do something. If somebody does me wrong, I'm supposed to go to them in person. And then if that's not heard, I always have the option to suffer myself to be defrauded. I always have that option. I don't always have to go to somebody else when something's wrong. But if I can't do that, and I go there once, not listen to, I can go back with two. But when I go back with two, it could be that those two tell me, you know what, this isn't even worth it. Okay, but you go back with two, and it still didn't solve. Then you're supposed to take it before the church. That's all scriptural. But now there is times when you probably can sue each other, and that's agreed upon. Maybe there's a large settlement. You hit somebody's car, and technically, probably with insurance, you're suing somebody. I get those sort of things. That's not what this is talking about. Matt and I have lost a lot of money together. Y'all remember Uncle Al's hot dogs? Yeah, what was it, $5,000 we lost? At the time, $5,000 was, it's still a lot of money. But, at the time, $5,000. We owned Uncle Al's hot dogs. I don't know if you know that. It's one of our many business adventures that we did. And, but, we both just looked at each other and said, here we go, move on and keep going. But look at this. Do you not know that the saints shall judge the world? If the world shall be judged by you, are ye unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more the things that pertain to this life? If then ye have judgments of things pertaining to this life, set them to judge who are the least esteemed of the church. So, you look to the church, you find who is the dumbest person in the church. And we're not going to look around and try to figure that out. All this volunteers that person, okay? But we'd have more wisdom going to that person than we would going to a lawyer than going to a judge. Bible. I speak this to your shame. Is it so that there's not a wise man among you? No, not one that shall be able to judge between his brethren. But brother goeth to law against brother, and that before the unbelievers. So that is not something we're supposed to be doing. Even this is teaching, hey, we're supposed to be going to the church. There's other people that we can talk to before we go to the law. And it doesn't mean we can't talk to people outside the church. But however, if I have an issue, if me and Matt couldn't solve our Uncle Al hot dog thing, probably our next step would be, did you even know about Uncle Al's hot dogs? We had the secret, mustard stuff. We bought it from a guy in Cave Junction. It was the craziest thing. And we couldn't get anybody to man it. You know how it is? Yeah, you know how tough it is to get somebody to actually work and show up to work. So we had Uncle Al's hot dogs for not even a couple of years. And people kept just taking money out of the till. It's like we're just throwing money at it, And my neighbor, who was one of our employees, but I never proved it, just one day just cleared out the till. The till was in my garage. And we're like, hey, it's going to cost us $2,000 to stay open for the next 2 weeks. And so we shot it in the head that day. And I'm not sure, it's not even my notes to talk about Uncle Al's hot dogs today, but it was a thing. And so through this, I'm not trying to set up for us a counseling ministry. But I had a knee-jerk reaction in that we left a place that said when you counsel somebody, you do what they said. And counseling and talking to the church staff was something that was pushed. And I probably shifted the opposite direction and said, you know what, I'm doing all the counseling from the pulpit, which I think is still pretty much true. But what we did do is we just kind of not had that, and so people didn't bring questions. I'm not setting it up so you come ask us questions. If you want to, you can. We're here for you. And but what we need to do is we just need to have counseling as something we do. And I've talked to Matt about this. I'm not sure I talked to Chris about it. I'm not sure what group we were in. But between the three of us, we have over 60 years of ministry experience. We're close to 70 years between the three of us. And you know what we need to do? We need to have guidelines instead. Here's a couple guidelines for you. We will report crimes. Come to me and ask, hey, you know what, robbed a bank. And I can talk about a whole bunch of different things here. You know what? That's great. I'm not going to sweep it under the rug. And I'm saying, hey, that's great. You know what you need to do? You need to turn yourself in. There's other crimes that would probably be confessed that, churches get accused of sweeping under the rug. That's not happening. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much you give. If you've done certain things, you know what? Come talk to me about it. Next call is, hey, we will report crimes and we will disclose affairs if you don't. So if you come talk to me about that, you know what? Here's our next step. Here's your phone. We're going to take care of this. So that'll probably eliminate half the counseling right there. We will decline to counsel if we're not qualified to do so, and I think that's the big thing. Too many times, people go to pastors, and pastors will say, you know what, you're completely out of my league. Here's what you need to do. Not out of my league. That means for dating, right? Yeah, you're out of my league, but this is above my pay grade. Let's go with that. This is above my pay grade. And so, say, hey, here's what you do. Like if you come talk to me about, some financial problem you're having in life, I can give you a couple pointers by saying, you know what, go talk to Matt. Or you're having some other mental issues, PTSD or anything going on, and trauma responses or other nature. Well, you know what, I can help you a little bit. I can give you some pointers, some things to think about. But here's some things you ought to do, people you ought to see. And if you ever come to me, by the way, I'll refer you to a suicide prevention service. I am not the right person to talk to when it comes to that. But however, if you need help, what you need to do is you need to talk to somebody. And I tell you right now, I'm not the right guy. You probably get referred to Chris first. And then after that, it's probably, hey, we need to make a phone call, Cahoots, something to get this taken care of. But who are you going to go to? If you have money problems, who better than to talk to than Matt? You have Bible questions, general child rearing things, you can go to either Matt, Chris, whatever. You have general stuff, talk to me if you want. Or there's other people you can talk to. But I want to talk about this real quick. How about therapy? And I'm going to talk about this for a moment because, you know what, I feel like I owe people an apology. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But, the counseling sometimes is for things going on in here. Counseling sometimes for things going on in here, right? It's not about how much money I'm going to spend or what contract I'm going to sign or who I'm going to date or how I'm going to handle certain things. If I have a broken arm, I don't pray that it heals. I do pray that it heals, don't I? But the first thing I probably do is I probably go to the doctor, right? My arm's broken or it does this. All those different hops and things. See, we have 2 kids from this church and they're college athletes right now. That's what's in the future. It's just everything's going to pop later and it's just part of life. It's just pop everything. But if you have a bullet hole, you don't pray that it heals. Well, you do. But you go to the doctor. And so you seek military advice. But however, sometimes there is stigma attached to some things. Not for some though, but for some there is. For me there was, and that's what I'm talking about in this last part. Some people don't need hardly, if any, therapy type work at all. I lump Lisa in that thing. I lump Miranda in there. If I knew you better, I'd probably lump the rest of you too. But your brain has some issues that prayer simply won't fix. Now, sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it does. How do we fix other parts of ourselves? Are we just supposed to be spiritually well? Can we pray away a heart condition? Can we pray away all these other different things? But yet we attach mental illness and mental health into prayer and make a mental issue a spiritual issue, and it isn't. I can solve all my mental problems with prayer. Maybe if I spend more time with the Lord. Maybe if I have more Bible. Maybe if I have more prayer. Maybe if I read my Bible more, I will be less depressed. But however, maybe there's some that don't need help, and come to find out there's others that do need help. I'm one of them. I went to counseling 1.5 years ago. There's 2 people in my life that I can't avoid. I could avoid by shutting people off, but there's some people that it's not healthy to shut off. And so, and I couldn't avoid it. It was all anger. It was all, finally one time, Lisa looked at me and said, you need to get this figured out. And we need to figure this out. And don't worry, the 2 people are not in this room today. As a matter of fact, they don't go to this church, so don't start, But she's like, I need you to fix this. And I had tried for years. And see, I'm the mentality, and that's where I got that one. If every time you have a negative thought, that you need to replace it with 3 to 5 positives. But so for me, in my mind, it's so chiseled into my mind that if you've done me wrong, I can't forget it. Which is funny because it's all erased. That chiseling's erased immediately by apology or an acknowledgement. But that's neither here nor there. But it was so chiseled into my mind that if I go for 3 to 5 positive thoughts for every negative thought I have, not only is that a lot of thinking, but at the same time, my first thought is, well, they're good people. Well, if they're good people, then why would they do that? It's instant. It was so chiseled. And so I actually had to adjust for myself, and I had to, for every negative thought or negative anything, I had to come up with a positive feeling. That's where it was that shallow to where eventually I had worked on where I am now, a year and a half. I'm fine. Fine with that. I only went like 6 times, but it gave me the tools I needed. But over the course of the last couple months, I realized I need to go back. I have, and we've talked about this, abandonment issues just all over the place. And with that, being a pastor is not the type of job you're supposed to have when you have abandonment issues. Because you have people abandon you all the time. It's part of the job. But what's funny is in the last couple of weeks, I had one appointment, went through one workbook, and I've, in my mind, started actually working things out and putting things together. I need to go back, but this is kind of going to be just a short process of trying to figure out, does anybody know attachment theories? Come to find out, I'm very insecure and anxious. Come to find out, I did the test, and I was 18 and very high started at, I was at 20 something, very high started at 15. I had Lisa take the test, and it was like super secure, and then me super insecure. And then, so I learned a lot about myself, and now get to think about it. But I needed something to set me in the right direction. Now, I didn't go to, somebody that's going to hypnotize me and try to flip switches that shouldn't be flipped or something of that nature. It was just going to seek a little bit of help to get me in the right direction. I have never said in this church, do not go see a behavioral therapist. Never one time. But however, is it possible that by not encouraging it either, I have also attached a stigma to it for people around me who might care what I think, or think that maybe the Bible would be against it, because there's a lot of people out there against therapy. Now, I'm against certain aspects of therapy. I'm against the stuff where we're blaming our parents for everything. Now, you can look at it and say, you know what, this happened because of how I was treated when I was 1, 2, 3, whatever the case is. And that's what I'm dealing with today. But for me to turn around and blame my parents for it is a completely different thing. You need to take accountability for your own triggers. I can't expect everybody around me to maintain their actions because my triggers are there. And I can look back and I can say, you know what? My mom did this at this certain time. My dad did this at this certain time. And that is why this happens. But for me to go back to them and say, this is what happened, this is what you did. Because you know what? I have done the same thing to my kids. Because I'm trying to avoid trying to give them the same issues that were passed to me. But you know what I did? I handed them a whole new set of issues. Because you know what? That happens when you're together for 18 years. It happens. Even the best of us. It's just something that happens. Because we're wired differently than people around us, we can bring the most healthy people up here, and there's still going to be something that's attached. I look at what happened, I see objectively, okay, my mom did this there's some things here, but I would have never gone back to my mom and said, it's because you did this. I'm supposed to honor my parents, always. Now, had they abused me, that'd be something different, right? Had they, any sort of abuse, things of that nature, but, neglect, my mom was trying her best. I tell you what, I've been trying my best for, that's 30 years old now. I've been trying my best, and you know what? But still, even with that, there's going to be some shortcomings. There's going to be some things I did wrong, because you know what? That's what it is. So, you can feel like something's wrong because of a perceived stigma around it, and that's part of the reason for the sermon today. I lived 30 minutes from Wrigley Field for 6 years. Wouldn't it have been cool to go catch a game at Wrigley Field? If I go back and look, I think I was near where the Bulls were playing when Michael Jordan might have been on the last end of his retirement from the Bulls. I'd have to double check that, but at least I know I was there during Scottie Pippen. I could have gone up and watched the Bulls play in Chicago. I could have watched the Bears game. But you know what? I never did those things because you know what? Those are secular things that Christians don't do. They were doing it. Here I am now. Football game, I don't care. Just go to whatever. But however, I can't blame them because they never said don't go to a Cubs game. Because I felt like I was wrong going there because I didn't think it was wrong to go to a Cubs game. But I thought people around me, maybe they don't because I didn't know that they did. Come to find out they were going the whole time. But however, because nobody said, hey, go to a Cubs game sometime, you're here, I never went. And so could it be that there is a stigma, there's no stigma attached to going to a Portland Trailblazer game, right? Matter of fact, you better do it quick because I think they're going to Carolina soon. But, there's no stigma going to a Duck game. There's no, actually there kind of is for me. I got nervous yesterday. We still got a bunch of time. So Lisa, Miranda, Becca, Angela went shopping. I forget who, but went shopping together. And so I was over at Guitar Center, then they were at Goodwill. I'll go over and check it out. So I walk up, and I looked on the counter, and you know what Miranda's buying? A Duck shirt. Okay, I need to give you a little me and Matt are Duck haters. I'm sorry, I know that other people aren't. Chris is a season ticket holder. Most of your Duck fans, I can't stand the Ducks. I'm sorry, I've tried. I got free tickets one time when they were playing Cal, and I said, Titus, you know what? We're going to be Duck fans for the day. And I couldn't do it. I was rooting for Cal by the middle of the second quarter. I've tried. I was a season ticket holder at Oregon State. But then I was sitting there one time, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And all of a sudden, they announced the score of the Ducks game, and the Ducks were losing. If you ever go with me to a concert, you go with me to a game, I'm not a cheery guy. I sit there and I take it in. I don't need to cheer. I don't need to yell, scream. However, when they announced that the Ducks were losing to somebody, here I am in Research Stadium. Yeah! Yeah! And it was in that moment I realized I'm not even a Beaver fan. What am I even doing here? I had all the Beaver gear, and I'm like, I'm not even a Beaver fan, I'm a Duck hater. And so I just checked out all of it. I never went to another Beaver game, I don't think. And I'm just like, this is just silly. Where'd that come from? Oh yeah, so, I'm like, what is it? So, it's Becca's. How did I get on that? I'm just shocked, the worst thing that could happen in my life is for Matt to become a Duck fan. That is the worst thing that could happen. There was a small chance one time when Ethan might have signed with the Ducks, and I'm like, you can't do it, man. He's like, well, it's my son, I kind of have to. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't wear green and yellow. You can't do it. You can't do it. We have time. I did go to a Duck game because I got 2 free tickets. I did go to the Duck game with Matt. And if you go to a Duck game with Matt, you better be ready for a fight. You better be ready because he's yelling things. But we wanted to see you. They're playing USC, and USC had a quarterback who was about to be a Heisman winner. And we had like 8 on the 8th row. And so we're sitting there just keeping quiet, people cheering around us. But Matt just couldn't help himself. We're leaving in the middle of the 3rd quarter, and he's taking off his sweatshirt to reveal it. We're not. Oregon's playing USC. Southern California. And so Matt's taking off his sweatshirt as we're walking up, revealing that he's wearing a Husky sweatshirt under this. And I'm like, things are getting thrown at us. I'm not a Husky fan either. I don't know how we got on that. Oh, so the Cubs. I could have gone to a Cubs game. But I never did because you know what? I thought that's not a Christian activity. How silly. So what the whole point of that was sometimes we attach stigma to things when it's really not there. Right? So it could be that happens. I know with Christianity, I know that happens with therapy. Sometimes you need to go talk to somebody. Don't let don't let somebody else around you stop you from doing that. See, Psalm, here's what you got to do. You got to be careful about who you talk to. Got to be careful. Psalm 1-2 says this, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. Now see that counsel of the ungodly. Hey, are you going to put those up there or what? Back there cruising TikTok during no, he's not. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel. Now there we go. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel. See, Clay made it look easy, didn't it? Clay just kind of brushed through it. Now, Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. So I'm not supposed to seek advice from ungodly people. It's right there. Nor standeth the way of the sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. Which, by the way, that's the position of a scorner, is to sit. If late night talk show hosts, you know what they're doing? They're all sitting. They're not doing anything. They just have commentary on everything else that's going on. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, so that should be our first source of counsel. And in his law doth he meditate day and night. It's part of the reason that God gave us church, community, connection, and that's why we're here. So we need to watch our influence. We joke. We do joke about ChatGPT. I get mad a hard time about it occasionally. But I don't think anyone is making major life decisions with using it. Stay away from mediums. Things like, is it tarot? I'm not sure. The cards. There's two options on tarot cards. Am I pronouncing that right? Does anybody know? Either they work or they don't. Either way, you should not be messing with them. If they work, then where's this coming from? It's not coming from the Lord. If they don't work, why are you doing it? You know, you break it down Ouija boards. Either Ouija boards are either they work or they don't. And if they work, you don't know what world you're messing with. And if they don't, why are you doing it? Either way, I'd steer clear. I'm going to say this again because now it's in my notes. Don't blame others. Take accountability for your actions and for your reactions. They're my reactions. It's my thing. It's my thing to deal with now. Because everybody has issues. Does anybody want to raise, it's rhetorical. Anybody want to raise your hand and tell me you don't have issues? I don't think any of us do. So, and also, I want to say this, I'm going to say this very clearly. Don't make major decisions with a counselor that only knows your side of the story. Too many times, there are people out there, all over, you can see the trend, social media, it's a whole thing now where people are just going no contact with their parents. They're talking to counselors that don't know the other side of the story. You need both sides of the story. Well, my parents did this. Well, maybe you should be talking to them. How about you bring the parents in and talk to them? How about some accountability there? How about maybe that would be a two-way conversation? You know what? As a kid, here's the things you did, and that's why I did this. And but counseling, we've set up counselors so much that how about your marriage? If you go in and talk to a marriage counselor and say, you know what, if that happened, you need to get a divorce. Well, maybe you need to get the other side of the story. One thing I won't do is I won't do marriage counseling for just one of you. If you come to me as just a guy, I'll counsel you on being a better husband. I'm not going to give you much marriage advice. Imagine me telling you, this is what you got to do without knowing the other side of the story. Before we cut people off, before we start getting on our parents' case, before we start seeing major relationships of our lives, which, by the way, we're still short here. But here's the whole thing. The whole thing with addiction? There's some addictions you physically cannot break. I get it. But have you ever thought about addictions and things of that nature? The whole way to break an addiction is to have something that is worth more to you on the other side. Something you're more passionate about. How many of you probably smoked before, but then all of a sudden get pregnant? Then what do? Mike, what did you do? We guys didn't get pregnant. But how many women get pregnant and then quit smoking? My mom quit smoking because she knew that I wouldn't allow my kids around her. Now, I'd allow my kids around my mother, of course. But she's, you know what? It's more important for her. And so if we find something that has a better outcome, we can't break addictions down, by the way. It happens all the time. But we don't want to look at it that way. And so it's about getting with the right people. It's about getting with the right things. And realize that those relationships that we have are worth it. I finally went and saw a behavioral therapist about those two people because it was affecting Lisa. You know what? That isn't worth it. And what I'm going about now is because, I found a pattern that I was actually being destructive with my friendships. And I was like, oh, wow, that makes sense. And it answered so many questions. But you know what? I'm glad that I have friends that I can talk to too. Sometimes when we do get together, the four of us, it turns into this, usually it's about me, about behaviors and personality types, and I get hammered a little bit. Okay, actually, Matt gets hammered more than I do. But when people are together, but for me, it's like, okay, I learned a few things here about how to do it. But Amos 3:3 talks about this. Amos 3:3 says, can two walk together, way to go, Wade, except they be agreed? I'm not going to be friends with somebody that I have fundamental differences with. I'm not going to be close friends with somebody who's not a Christian. If you do not believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, lived a sinless life, died, and rose again on the third day, and you haven't trusted him as your Savior, you know what? We're probably not going to be close friends. That's the most important thing to me. If you hate my wife, I'm probably not going to be friends with you. Because you know what? That's that. She's important to me. And so that's how that whole thing works. But watch this. Proverbs 27:17 says this, iron sharpeneth iron. And what we do is we generally stop that. Right at there, right? When we're caustic with somebody else, when we look at somebody else and we're sharp, iron sharpeneth iron, brother. Look at the second half of the verse. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. If you're not my friend, you're not allowed to be an iron to sharpen my countenance. Sharpening somebody's countenance is something that's earned. And if you've earned it, you know what? I'll take anything you got. If you haven't, I don't want to listen to it. All right, let's hit 3 points. We'll hit the house. I'm not even having lunch until 2:30 today. And I'm really struggling with this. And it's hot in here today. Normally it's cold. What is the deal? Normally it's freezing in here. So here I'm wearing an extra shirt and stuff. All right, number 1, seek counsel. Seek it. How does it look? Who's it come from? I don't know. You want to talk to me? Talk to me. You don't want to talk to me? Don't talk to me. I don't care. Seek counsel. Talk to somebody else. On top of that, number 2, seek good counsel. Talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. Now, if I'm looking to get my Jeep fixed, I'm not going to ask the person if they're saved. The person I'm going to is a behavioral therapist. I don't know if she's saved. I don't know if she catch that. I went to a guy first, this one, talking to a lady, whatever, I don't care. And it's just who I was assigned to. But you know what? We're just talking about personality things. And it's good counsel. But however, I'm not bringing up religion. I'm not bringing up Jesus Christ. I'm bringing up those things because you know what? It's off the table. I'm not going to talk to you about those things. But there is good advice. I'm not going to go ask on automotive, are you saved? You know, you trust Christ as your Savior before you work on my Jeep? Because you know what? I cussed at that Jeep a few times and kicked it. I hurt my toe kicking it. I cussed a lot at that Jeep. I should. Still do. And number 3, seek godly counsel. Most of the time when you need to seek godly counsel. You're looking at the Bible, you're seeking other people who care about you, who care about the Lord, and read the Bible as well. That's the person that you want to be asking questions of. That's the person you want to be seeking this. You know, I'm letting people get in my mind and flip switches and stuff like that. When I'm talking about that, you know, I'm talking about when Matt and Miranda and Lisa do that, we're talking about things. There's a level of trust there because they're godly people that I can trust them to go in and flip a few switches. But there's not going to hurt me if you want to trust them. So it's got to be a godly person in order for me to allow it. And so that's what we need to do. We need to be talking to other people. And again, I may owe you an apology because if you've been around for a while, maybe that stigma's around and sometimes it sticks and I've never done anything about it. And I should have told you, hey, sometimes you need to find some help. And so let's do that. Let's be there for each other and be here part of the community. All right. Love you all very much. Thank you for being here. Oh.
So are we Summit now?
Oh, we might as well talk about that. Oh, man, that was a fun argument at our staff meeting. Okay, yes. The short answer is yes, we are Summit. But there's still confusion. This whole transition is just kind of weird. And even that wasn't a definitive, yes, we are. But we are. But however, we're not really until we start the new place. But however, there's even debate on, well, what if somebody wants to come to church? And, some of us are, well, let's get them into church. And there's some, well, this isn't what we're going to look like in a few months. So I get that. But if we put out material, it says Summit, but it has this address, that's kind of weird. So
the new building already have Summit on
it does, but we're not there. But yes, we're Summit now. We kind of made it official at the staff meeting. When was that? Last Sunday afternoon. And it was kind of a fun argument, because actually I think we're mostly giving Becca a hard time. But it was, we're pretty much everything is Summit.
So like a tithing check doesn't need to be written out to Summit?
Oh, no. Okay, that's what Chris was joking about. You can make it out to Summit, you can make it out to Grace Baptist Church, because maybe you don't like the name change. You know, so you make it out to Summit. Or you technically, yes, Grace Baptist Church, what we were. But however, we started the church at Mount Pisgah, it's Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, and you still technically can write a check to Mount Pisgah Baptist Church.
Okay.
And here's the reasoning for that, since I have you here. And so what happened was, we decided on the name change that I went in to change the corporate paperwork, to change everything, so we could just be done with it and just be Summit from here on out. However, the corporate and state hoops that we'd have to run through wasn't feasible.
So are we just abbreviate? Okay.
So if anybody gets mad that we're not a Baptist church, we technically still are. And by the way, people have asked that. We put out an ad, they've asked what kind of church or what denomination. Well, we're not a denomination, but anybody who doesn't put their denomination on their sign, there's still something. You know, even if they say what they are. So I always answer the question, we're closest to a Baptist church doctrinally and everything. Because we're not trying to hide anything, but you know, we feel that the Baptists have gone a little crazy. Either they're compromising or they've just gone off on the deep end on other stuff. And we all decided we don't want to be associated with that. We want to be associated with the doctrine, but not with the name on the sign. And I gave 7 reasons actually about a year ago why we're doing the name change. We finally made it official. So does that explain what we
Yes.
did? We would have to go, and some people don't agree with church to be 501c3. We have one, but we can also take donations. But that would have been an $800 charge right there if we were to continue that. With some things that we want to do with the community. I don't come up here, 501c3, they think that if you have that now you're not going to talk about politics. When in my 21 years here have I ever endorsed a candidate anyways? I'm never going to do it. It's just, I don't care. I mean, I do care. But you know what? For me to come up here and tell you who to vote for is, I think, an abuse of power. I think it's an abuse of influence, and I'm not going to do it. So I don't care anyways. I'm going to preach about abortion, gay marriage, and all sorts of neat stuff regardless. If they want to take away that, that's fine. I don't care. But so that being said, all of that would have had to have changed, and it was just so much work that none of us wanted to do it. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, we are Summit Church. But if you call us Grace Baptist Church, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to correct you. If you call us Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, we're going to laugh about it. Matter of fact, hey, can you turn off the casting? I'm going to show you one thing today, and just for you to laugh. You ready? Because we're going to do one more rebrand before it's all said and done. Do you want to see what it is? Bam! Now you might have to, Dave got it. It's the Cracker Barrel. Oh, I thought it was funny with all the name changes and everything we're doing.
We're gonna buy all their old stuff?
I don't think they're gonna be open much longer. But you know, it took me about 5 minutes last time. Like, this would be hilarious. I'm not gonna show it to anybody. I changed it on. And you know what? I think it's hilarious.
It is.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, just a little bit of humor there. I am hungry for the country fried, for the fried chicken. No, what is it?
Steak.
Chicken fried steak, whatever. And now that, you know, you're going to go there, nobody's going to be there, so now's the time to go up and get it. But anyways, I thought that'd be a good rebrand for the future. But I did put on social media things, no way, not enough people to get it. All right, thank you for being here. Love you all very much. Have a great week. You're dismissed.